Hey guys, so Bonnie asked the question, how come when I'm not consciously logging food or thinking about dieting, and she put that in quotes, I don't think about food so much or have too many cravings. But when I know I have to log or diet, I all of a sudden think about food all day, what my next meal will be, and I get sugar cravings. Why is that? So I think this is a great question. And I think it hits on an experience that most of us have had before. But first, know, Bonnie, that you're not alone. Okay, second, know that there's not something wrong with you because this happens and because you do have these thoughts. It's normal, it's expectable, and it makes sense when you break it down. So I'd like to look at this question from a few different angles. And I noticed immediately in reading the question in the language that was being used. So listen to these phrases. You've got, quote, when I'm not consciously, unquote, uh, thinking about dieting, and then have to. If something isn't conscious, it means often that we're not deliberately thinking about it. So if it's not at the front of our minds, it won't necessarily cause a change in our thinking or our behavior, right? So if something is conscious, on the other hand, and it's perceived to be particularly negative, then it's going to be front and center, right here, front and center, right in front of our faces. And so then that thought will then cause more thoughts. We're creating connections. If it's negative and then we perceive it as a threat, then we're going to be on the lookout for more threats and for more negativity. So most people, for example, when they hear the word diet, what do they think of next? They think of hungry, they think of deprivation, they think of starving, and they think of what they can't eat typically and not being able to, I can't eat what I like. So if this is the case, would it not make sense then to think about something else? Instead of thinking about dieting, think about where the dieting can lead you. Why are you dieting? What is the outcome that you're looking for? So is it health? Is it vitality? Is it better energy? Is it strength? So thinking about these other thoughts, don't you think that those would lead to subsequently more positive ones? There's a classic white bear study that social psychologist Daniel Wegner did in the late 80s. And he asked his participants to do everything they could to not think about a white bear. I know what you guys are thinking. So guess what happens? The participants ended up ruminating and just thinking over and over and repeatedly about, guess what? A white bear. So what this indicates is that trying to suppress a thought brings that thought front and center. So a white bear, right, it's pretty innocuous thing to think about. It seems pretty neutral. But try to do that with a certain type of food. And you'll find that you keep thinking about that food. And I like to use brownies as an example because I like them. And they're a food that I would consider a trigger for me. Pita chips is another example. They're just foods that I try to stay away from. If I were to tell myself to stop thinking about them, guess what's going to happen? It's called ironic process theory. Ironic, when you try to suppress a thought and you end up thinking more about that very thought or that thing. And oftentimes, what that can lead to is thinking something even more distressing, which is, what's wrong with me that I keep thinking these thoughts? And obviously that's not what we want to have happen. So the white bear problem, again, came to be known as the ironic process theory. And it's another reason why I have my clients write their goals down in more positive terms as opposed to negative. So I might have my client who is working on her parenting skills, for example, say, I will tell my children that I love them 3 times a day, for example, instead of, I won't yell at my kids. So the goal may be to reduce the anger that she's demonstrating towards her kids, but if we can connect it to something that actually gives her something to act on, to have a behavior to move toward, then she's more likely to change the negative behavior. So, like, not yelling is static, it doesn't move, it doesn't go anywhere. So, how do I know what to do? I'm always asked that question too. So, what do I do? Well, telling your kids that you love them is dynamic, it's got energy to it, so it's active. That can be more effective. If you look at it from the dieting perspective, say that you have the thought, I'm really hungry. You can use that then as a cue to focus on something else, and that's called focus distraction. So when I'm dieting, for example, I like to think about everyone else who's dieting because it takes the focus off of me and how I may be feeling sorry for myself that I'm so hungry and deprived. Takes the focus off my hunger. It takes me away from my experience and gives me some perspective. It broadens my perspective. So again, that's refocusing my thoughts. I like to call that attentional positioning. So the other phrase in Bonnie's statement that I wanted to capitalize on that can be particularly detrimental is that have to. So first, let's think about this realistically. Does she really have to? Is someone coercing her into this? Is someone holding a gun to her head saying, you have to diet, Bonnie? Or is she making this decision on her own? No one's commanding her to do this, I hope, Bonnie. But you can easily see how if someone is forcing you into something, that it can feel that your autonomy or your sense of choice is being removed or taken away or threatened in some way, compromised. So to combat that, what I suggest doing is using different wording. How about saying, I choose to? How about saying, I'm choosing to work on getting healthy? Notice how I left the word diet completely out of it. So in this case, let's talk about logging food. I choose to log my food. So then you can follow that up with the reasons why you choose to log your food. How come it's important to you? Get to the heart of the matter. Get to the meaning of the actual behavior. So what this hits on is this key factor of determination. And when we look at that in terms of goal pursuit, what we know is that for a goal to stick, for you to be persistent in pursuing the goal ideally meets your 3 basic psychological needs, which are autonomy, competence, and connectedness. In this case, using the words I have to take away that felt sense of autonomy. And so you want to change your wording around. So finally, I think it's important to understand that even when you're not dieting, for fat loss, for example, you still exhibit restraint, right? When you go to a restaurant, you may exhibit restraint when you say, please leave the bread off the table. Or when you say to yourself, I'm going to have 1 slice of bread and then stop there. Or when you decide to leave half of your meal on your plate to take it home because you know that it's just too much at one time. So you choose to eat meals in certain portions. You choose to not eat certain foods, for example. You choose to forego the desserts every day of the week because you just know that it's unnecessary and you'd probably gain weight doing that. You do that for whatever reason, but it's restraint. And you do that whether you're dieting or not. So if you're, I mean, you do that anyway. So why is it such a big deal? These are the kinds of strategies I use to reason with my clients, but also with myself. So to review, why do you think about what you don't want to think about? That was the main question. And it's because you're thinking about what you don't want to think about. And remember, and I love this name, it's ironic process theory. It makes sense. But consider too the language that you're using, Bonnie, and the meanings that you've attached to certain words and phrases, and then change them. Change them to something more positive. So then what you can do is when you have the negative phrase or word or image pop into your head, you can use that as a cue to then think about the positive ones. And then stop taking yourself so seriously. When people diet, they go to, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. Oh my gosh, this is so miserable. They go to these very negative places. You guys are thinking about being hungry while thousands of kids die of starvation every day. So stop taking yourself so seriously, but also, I mean, see the humor in what you're doing. Use humor, use positivity. So I hope this helps, Bonnie. Thank you.